An ordinary black leather case with 20 rounds of ammunition here and here. Now, if you take the top off, you'll find the ammunition inside. Press that button there. Now she comes.
What if one Bond film carried real death, real politics, and real danger behind the scenes? What if the movie that made James Bond global also held secrets tied to a president's final days and a tragedy no one talks about? From hidden Cold War decisions to actors risking their lives, From Russia with Love is more than a sequel. It's where the Bond formula was truly born and nearly broken. In this deep dive, we're uncovering 25 strange, shocking, and rarely discussed facts that shaped the franchise forever. Some are clever, some are dangerous, and one still feels unsettling. 25. The most tragic story behind the film. Some stories behind a film stay hidden because they are simply too heavy to tell. This is one of them. Pedro Armendáriz, who played Karim Bey, was already battling a serious illness when production began. The pain was constant, and it showed. Yet he chose to move forward, determined to finish what he started. The production team saw what he was going through and made a rare decision. They rearranged the entire schedule, pushing all his scenes to the front so he could complete them as quickly as possible. Every moment on set carried a quiet urgency. There was no room for delay. Despite the physical toll, Armendáriz delivered a performance filled with warmth and strength, never letting his condition define the character. But once filming wrapped, reality caught up. Shortly after completing his scenes, he made the heartbreaking decision to end his life. He never saw the final film. His performance remains, but the story behind it lingers in a way few others do. And yet, just days before tragedy struck the world stage, another story quietly unfolded. 24. The last movie JFK ever watched. Some films carry history with them. Others become part of it. This one did both. In November 1963, President John F. Kennedy arranged a private screening of From Russia with Love inside the White House. It wasn't a public event. No headlines, just a quiet moment. A leader watching a film he genuinely enjoyed. At that point, Bond was still new to American audiences, but Kennedy already knew its appeal. The timing, though, is what gives this story its weight. The screening took place just days before November 22, 1963. What followed in Dallas would change the course of history forever. And with that, the film became forever linked to a moment far bigger than cinema. It wasn't planned. It wasn't intended. But it happened. That quiet screening turned into something haunting in hindsight. A simple viewing became the last film a president would ever see. And once you know that, it's hard to separate the movie from that moment. 23. JFK is the reason this film exists. Before Bond became a global icon, he needed a push. And that push came from an unexpected place. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy listed From Russia with Love, the novel by Ian Fleming, among his favorite books. It wasn't just a casual mention. It appeared in a widely read publication, instantly giving the story massive attention. Book sales surged almost overnight. What had been a strong spy novel suddenly became a cultural talking point. Producers Albert Broccoli and Harry Saltzman were paying close attention. They had just launched Bond on screen with Dr. No, but the next step mattered. Choosing the right follow-up could define the franchise or stall it. Kennedy's endorsement made that decision easier. The novel already had momentum, credibility, and public curiosity. It felt like the safest and smartest choice. So they moved forward. What seemed like a simple selection was actually a turning point. One recommendation helped shape the direction of an entire franchise. 22. The opening Bond death shocked audiences. The film doesn't ease you in. It strikes immediately. A man who looks exactly like James Bond moves quietly through a dark garden. Every step careful, every shadow suspicious. Then it happens. An assassin appears. The attack is sudden, brutal, and final. Bond is strangled. Just like that, the hero is gone. For audiences in 1963, this was shocking. The story hadn't even started. Yet, 007 was already dead. That opening created instant tension. No setup, no warning. Just a bold move that made viewers question everything they were about to see. If Bond could die this easily, what kind of film was this going to be? Then the twist hits. Lights turn on. The body is revealed. It's not Bond at all. It's a training dummy, wearing a lifelike mask, part of a deadly exercise designed to prepare an assassin. The moment shifts from shock to realization. 21. That scene changed the entire franchise. What feels like a carefully planned tradition actually started as a last-minute idea. The opening Bond death sequence wasn't even meant to begin the film. It was originally part of a training scene placed later in the story. But during editing, the filmmakers saw something different. They realized this moment had power. It created shock, tension, and immediate intrigue. So they moved it to the very front, placing it before the main titles. That single decision introduced something new. A cold open. A short burst of action before the story truly begins. It pulled audiences in instantly, setting the tone before a single line of the main plot unfolded. It wasn't explained. It didn't need to be. It simply worked. And from that point on, it became a pattern. Every Bond film that followed adopted this structure. Different locations, different stakes, same idea. What started as a late adjustment turned into a defining formula, a signature move, and one of the most recognizable openings in film history. 20. The shoe knife was based on real spy weapons. Some Bond gadgets feel exaggerated. This one doesn't. Rosa Klebb's hidden shoe knife is sharp, quick, and unsettlingly simple. A small blade, concealed inside her footwear, triggered with a flick. It looks like something designed purely for shock, but it wasn't created out of thin air. It was inspired by real tools used during the Cold War. Espionage at that time relied on concealment. Agents needed weapons that could pass unnoticed, something compact, something easy to hide. Reports and accounts from that era suggest that hidden blades, including those built into shoes or everyday items, were not just ideas. They existed. They were used. Quietly. Efficiently. That detail changes the way the scene feels. It's no longer just a dramatic moment. It becomes something closer to reality. Something grounded in actual spy tactics. Bond has always balanced fantasy with truth. But in moments like this, the line almost disappears. And what seems theatrical suddenly feels much more real than expected. 19. SPECTRE was invented out of fear. In the original novel, the enemy was real. SMERSH, a Soviet counterintelligence agency, stood directly against Bond. It made sense on the page. The Cold War was active, tensions were high, and the lines were clear. But bringing that same idea to the screen was a different challenge. The world in the early 1960s was on edge. One wrong move, even in a film, could create backlash. So the filmmakers made a careful decision. They stepped away from using a real government agency as the main villain. Instead, they created something new. A shadow organization with no clear allegiance, no flag, no country, just power and control. That group became SPECTRE. It solved multiple problems at once. It avoided political tension, opened creative freedom, and allowed Bond to face enemies beyond real-world limits. The threat became larger, more mysterious, and more flexible. 18. Blofeld secretly debuted here. Some of the most powerful introductions don't announce themselves. They stay hidden, quiet, almost easy to miss. That's exactly how Ernst Stavro Blofeld enters the Bond world for the first time in From Russia with Love. He's there, but not fully revealed. You don't see his face. You don't get a full identity. Instead, you see fragments, a calm voice, a controlled presence, a man seated, often stroking a white cat. It's subtle, but it leaves an impression. That choice was deliberate. By hiding his face, the filmmakers created something far more effective than a standard villain reveal. They built mystery. They gave the audience something to wonder about. Who is this man? How powerful is he? What is he capable of? That unanswered tension didn't end with this film. It carried forward, growing stronger with each appearance. Blofeld wasn't just introduced. He was planted, and over time, he became one of the most recognizable and feared figures in the entire Bond series. 17. The brutal train fight redefined action scenes. The fight on the train doesn't feel staged. It feels uncomfortable, tight, and real. Inside a narrow compartment, Bond faces Red Grant in a confrontation that quickly turns physical. There's no space to move freely. Every strike lands harder because there's nowhere to escape. The scene wasn't rushed either. It took nearly 3 weeks to film, carefully built piece by piece to capture every moment of tension. What makes it stand out even more is what you don't hear. There's no music guiding the scene, no dramatic score telling you how to feel. Just the sound of bodies colliding, fists hitting, breath growing heavier, and the constant rhythm of the train beneath them. It strips everything down to its core. That choice makes the fight feel raw and grounded. It's not flashy. It's exhausting. And that's exactly why it works. Many action scenes try to impress. This one pulls you in and holds you there, making it one of the most realistic and memorable fights ever put on screen. 16. The danger in the helicopter scene was real. The helicopter chase looks intense on screen, but what happened behind the camera was even more serious. Sean Connery didn't step aside for a stunt double in this moment. He ran the scene himself, moving across open ground, while a real helicopter hovered and circled above him. The idea was simple. Keep it controlled, keep it safe. But that's not how it played out. The pilot, who had limited experience with this kind of stunt work, flew far closer than planned. Not once, but multiple times. The distance between the spinning blades and Connery became dangerously small. Every pass carried real risk. There was no margin for error. One mistake could have ended very differently. What you see in the final cut feels tense, because it was tense. Connery wasn't acting afraid. He was reacting to a situation that had slipped beyond full control. The scene works because the danger was real, and the camera captured it exactly as it happened. 15. The director survived a real crash. Filming a spy movie often means controlled danger. This wasn't controlled. During location scouting, director Terrence Young was flying in a helicopter over water when things suddenly went wrong. A strong gust hit the aircraft, throwing it off balance. Within moments, it lost control and crashed into the water below. What started as a routine flight turned into a life-threatening situation. The impact was violent. The helicopter sank quickly, pulling everything down with it. For a brief moment, Young was trapped inside, disoriented, surrounded by water, trying to find a way out. There was no time to think, only react. Somehow, he managed to escape before the aircraft fully submerged. Most people would have stopped right there, called it a day, taken time to recover. But Young didn't. After the crash, after everything he had just gone through, he returned to set and continued working the very same day. No delay, no pause. That kind of response says everything about the pace and pressure behind this production. 14. The Bond girl's voice isn't hers. On screen, Tatiana Romanova feels calm, precise, and perfectly in control. Her voice matches the character so well that most viewers never question it. But what you hear isn't Daniela Bianchi's real voice at all. Every single line was replaced in post-production. The performance you see and the voice you hear come from two different people. Bianchi spoke very little English at the time of filming. She delivered her lines phonetically, focusing on expression and timing rather than full understanding. It worked visually, but the audio needed refinement. So another actress was brought in to re-record the dialogue, shaping the tone, accent, and rhythm to fit the character. This might sound unusual now, but at the time, it was common in European cinema. Films often blended actors from different countries, and dubbing helped unify the final result. In this case, it created a seamless illusion. The result is a performance that feels complete, even though it was built from two separate parts, working together. 13. She didn't actually speak English. What you see on screen feels smooth and natural, but the process behind it was anything but simple. Daniela Bianchi did not speak fluent English during filming. Instead, she learned her lines phonetically, repeating sounds rather than fully understanding the language. Every sentence had to be memorized by rhythm, not meaning. That made timing harder, reactions trickier, and emotional delivery more dependent on instinct. Because of this, the production knew early on that her dialogue would need to be replaced. Full dubbing became necessary, not optional. Another voice would carry the words, while Bianchi carried the presence. It was a split performance, carefully aligned in post-production. But that challenge pushed her in a different direction. Without relying on dialogue, she leaned into physical acting. Facial expressions, eye movement, posture, and subtle gestures became her tools. She communicated through stillness as much as speech. In the end, what could have been a limitation turned into a strength, shaping a performance that feels controlled, quiet, and visually convincing from start to finish. What if the Bond girl you watched wasn't actually the one you heard? The next reveal uncovers how that casting choice hides more than you think. 12. She was the youngest Bond girl at the time. At just 21 years old, Daniela Bianchi stepped into a role that carried more weight than it first appeared. Playing Tatiana Romanova wasn't just about charm or presence, it required balance. Innocence on the surface, but something deeper underneath. Her age made that contrast stand out. She didn't feel hardened or overly confident. She felt real, uncertain at times, curious, and that worked in the film's favor. At the time, she became the youngest actress to take on a leading Bond girl role, a record that held for decades. That detail alone sets her apart, but it's what she brought to the screen that made it last. There's a softness in her performance that adds tension to the story. You're not just watching a typical spy interaction. You're watching someone caught in something bigger than herself. That sense of vulnerability adds a different layer to Bond's world. It slows certain moments down, making them feel more personal, more grounded, and harder to predict. 11. The cast was full of beauty queens. There's a polished look to this film that feels intentional. It wasn't just casting for acting ability. It was casting for presence. Several actresses in From Russia with Love came from the world of beauty pageants, bringing with them a level of confidence, poise, and camera awareness that translated naturally on screen. This wasn't a coincidence. It was part of the film's visual identity. Daniela Bianchi herself had competed at the Miss Universe level, earning recognition before stepping into the role of Tatiana. She wasn't alone. Other performers in the film also had backgrounds in pageants, each contributing to that refined, striking look the movie carries throughout. Every scene they appear in feels carefully composed, almost deliberate in how it presents them. But it wasn't just about appearance. That training gave them control. How to move, how to hold a frame, how to draw attention without saying a word. The result is a film that doesn't just tell a story. It presents one, with every face and every moment designed to hold your focus.
10. A real championship chess game is hidden inside. It looks like a simple scene, a quiet game of chess, played with calm focus and sharp intent. But what's on that board isn't random. It's not just a prop. The position you see is taken from a real match, played by Boris Spassky during the USSR Championship, one of the most respected games of its time. Carefully studied, carefully remembered. The filmmakers didn't invent the sequence. They recreated it. Piece by piece, move by move, they placed the board in a configuration that reflected a real moment in chess history. That level of detail is easy to miss, but it adds something subtle to the scene. It gives it weight. It makes the intelligence behind the character feel more authentic. Spassky would later become world champion, but even before that, this game stood out as one of his most memorable. And somehow, it found its way into a Bond film. It's a small detail, quiet, precise, but once you notice it, the scene feels completely different. 9. The filmmakers misunderstood chess copyright. The attention to detail in the chess scene was impressive, but it came with a strange twist. The filmmakers believed that specific chess positions might be protected, as if they could be owned or restricted. To avoid any possible issue, they made a quiet change. The board was altered slightly. A few pieces were removed. The layout shifted just enough to feel different, even though the original inspiration remained clear. It wasn't a creative choice. It was a precaution based on a misunderstanding. Chess positions aren't owned in that way. They're part of a shared history, studied and replayed across generations. But at the time, the production didn't want to take risks, so they adjusted the scene anyway. The result is subtle. Most viewers never notice the difference. The tension of the match still comes through. The strategy still feels real. But underneath it, there's this small, almost ironic detail. 8. Q was officially born here. Before this film, the idea of Bond receiving specialized equipment existed, but it wasn't fully defined. That changed here. This is where Q appears in the form audiences would come to recognize instantly. Calm, precise, slightly irritated, and always focused on the details. He isn't just handing over tools. He's setting rules, explaining functions, making it clear that these gadgets are not toys.
Desmond Llewellyn steps into the role with a tone that feels natural from the start. There's authority in the way he speaks, but also a quiet humor beneath it. His presence balances Bond's confidence, grounding the moment with structure and control. It's a simple scene on the surface, but it introduces something much bigger. From this point forward, Q becomes a constant. Film after film, he returns, refining the relationship, building familiarity with the audience. What begins as a straightforward briefing evolves into one of the most anticipated parts of every Bond story. And it all starts here, with a single introduction that defined a legacy. 7. The briefcase started Bond's gadget era. Before the wild inventions and futuristic devices, there was something much simpler. A briefcase, but not an ordinary one. Inside, it held a hidden rifle, a concealed knife, stacks of gold, and a tear gas trap designed to trigger if opened incorrectly. Every feature had a purpose. Nothing felt excessive. Everything felt usable. What made it stand out wasn't just what it contained, but how it was built. This wasn't a hollow prop made only for the camera. It was fully functional, designed to actually work as intended. Compartments opened smoothly. Mechanisms clicked into place. It felt real because it was real. That grounded approach gave the scene weight. You could believe a spy would carry something like this. It wasn't flashy. It was practical, and that made it more impressive. From this moment on, gadgets became a defining part of Bond. They would grow more advanced over time, but they all trace back to this one case. Simple, precise, and built with purpose. 6. The villain wasn't actually tall. On screen, Red Grant feels imposing, solid, controlled, physically dominant. He looks like a perfect match for Bond, someone who can match him move for move. But behind the scenes, the reality was different. Robert Shaw was actually shorter than Sean Connery, not by much, but enough that it could have shifted the visual balance between hero and villain. The filmmakers didn't leave that to chance. To maintain the illusion, Shaw often stood on wooden boxes during their shared scenes. Simple adjustment, but effective. Combined with careful camera angles, framing, and posture, the height difference disappeared. What remained was presence. And that's where Shaw truly stood out. His performance didn't rely on size. It relied on control. The way he moved, the way he watched, the way he waited. Every action felt deliberate. So even though the physical difference was real, it never mattered. The character still came across as a true threat. Not because of height, but because of how convincingly he carried it. 5. That performance led to Jaws. Sometimes a single role opens the door to something even bigger. Robert Shaw's portrayal of Red Grant didn't just leave an impression on audiences. It caught the attention of filmmakers watching closely, including a young director named Steven Spielberg. There was something about Shaw's presence, controlled, intense, and unpredictable. He didn't need exaggerated moments to feel dangerous. He carried it naturally. That exact quality would later define another character. Spielberg cast Shaw as Quint in Jaws, a role that demanded the same quiet strength but with deeper layers. This time, the threat wasn't just physical. It was personal. Quint wasn't just hunting a shark. He was confronting something tied to his past, and Shaw brought that weight into every scene. The performance became unforgettable. Sharp lines, strong presence, and a sense of tension that never fully settled. 4. Rosa Klebb was played by a legend. Some villains rely on loud presence. Rosa Klebb doesn't. She moves quietly, speaks calmly, and still feels unsettling. That effect didn't happen by chance. It came from Lotte Lenya, a performer with deep roots in both stage and film. She wasn't just experienced, she was respected. An award-winning actress known for her precision, control, and ability to hold attention without forcing it. Before stepping into this role, Lenya had already built a strong reputation through theater, especially in musical productions that demanded both discipline and presence. That background shaped how she approached Klebb. Every gesture feels measured. Every line feels intentional. There's no rush, no wasted movement. What makes her performance stand out is how restrained it is. She doesn't need to raise her voice or exaggerate emotion. The menace comes from stillness, from how she watches, from how she waits. 3. Connery wore a toupee the entire time. James Bond is often seen as the image of confidence and control, smooth, sharp, and always composed. But there was one detail most viewers never noticed. Sean Connery had been losing his hair since his early 20s. By the time he stepped into the role of Bond, that change was already well underway. Instead of hiding it off-screen, the solution became part of the production itself. Connery wore a toupee throughout his entire Bond run, carefully styled, carefully maintained, and designed to match the character's polished image. It wasn't treated as a flaw, it was simply managed, like any other part of the costume. And it worked. Audiences rarely picked up on it. The focus stayed on the performance, the presence, the way he carried himself. The hair became invisible, not because it wasn't there, but because everything else held attention. 2. Hitchcock almost directed this film. There was a moment when this film could have taken a very different direction. Alfred Hitchcock, known for building tension with precision and control, reportedly showed interest in directing a Bond movie. On paper, it made sense. His style matched the tone. Suspense, quiet danger, controlled pacing. It could have been a natural fit. But the reality came down to cost. Hitchcock's fee alone would have taken a large portion of the budget. For a series that was still proving itself, that was a risk the producers weren't willing to take, so the idea never moved forward. Another director stepped in, and the film followed a different path. Still, the influence didn't disappear. You can see traces of it in certain moments, the way scenes build slowly, the use of space, the tension that grows without needing constant action. It feels familiar. That what if lingers when you watch the finished film closely. Certain sequences feel like they're holding back on purpose, letting silence and framing do the work instead of dialogue or spectacle. It's the kind of restraint Hitchcock was known for, where tension comes from what's implied, not shown. Even without him behind the camera, the film carries that DNA in subtle ways. It doesn't rush. It watches. And in those moments, you can almost imagine the version of the film that might have been. A legendary director almost shaped this film. But the final touch that remained is something most viewers completely miss. 1. The theme song plays at the end, not the beginning. Most Bond films open with a bold theme song that sets the tone right away. This one doesn't. It holds back. At the start, you only hear the instrumental version, woven quietly into the opening credits. The full voice is missing. It feels restrained, almost incomplete, as if something is being saved. That something comes later. The song, performed by Matt Monro, doesn't appear in full until the final moments of the film. As the story winds down, the vocals finally arrive, smooth and controlled, carrying a different kind of weight. It shifts the mood. What began as tension ends on something softer, more reflective. That decision changes how the film feels as a whole. Instead of starting strong and fading out, it builds quietly and releases at the end. It's subtle, but effective. By placing the full theme in the closing scene, the film leaves a lasting impression. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, memorable, and hard to forget once it's over. It also quietly reshapes how you remember the film after it ends. Because the full version only arrives at the conclusion, the melody becomes tied to resolution rather than introduction. This film didn't just build Bond, it defined everything that came after, from the action to the villains to the formula itself. Some of these details are easy to miss, but once you see them, the film feels completely different. If one of these facts surprised you, drop it in the comments and let us know. Like, subscribe, and watch the next video on your screen to see how another Bond film changed the game in a whole new way.